Welcome everybody to another Voice of Nick video editing stream. We're going to be doing more of this Metal Gear 2 review. And let's see if it occurs to me that the color temperature on some of this stuff is, like on my iPhone I guess, looks different than the, oh geez, Lumetri doesn't work here. It looks different than the camera for the stream. And I like the stream camera's color temperature better, so let's see if we can Lumetri this thing into the way we want it. So if I white balanced it to like, what's a white thing? This? No, that doesn't work. To my teeth? To my eyes? This is a really, like, not a great way to do what we're trying to do. Let's see if we could just change the temperature. You don't really get that much kind of you can't do that much with these sliders. But if I turn Lumetri off and on, it does seem a little more natural now, I guess, because the wall back there is not, it's not really yellow. It's like it's like off-white, but it's not as yellow as it looks in these videos. It must just be like a, you know, whatever it is, like a scene file thing or whatever with the iPhone. I forget what you call that. The like a LUT. We need like a LUT, an iPhone LUT. See that? Like that's very yellow. And this looks a little too ghostly, but it's better than before. Let's see, do we have any color wheels? Midtones. So now you can really screw around with, make the midtones a different color. And we could make it kind of like more stylized if we wanted to. I don't really want to mess with all that. Maybe like that. And then the highlights. We have a lot of highlights here. Hold on. This thing is too small. Maybe we want them to be more like red. So now if we go back to the regular curves and or settings, change the exposure a little bit. Let's leave the exposure. Change the contrast maybe. Turn highlights down. Maybe also the shadows down. But I would like to put the midtones up. And I don't think you can do that in Premiere's thing. But you can just change the general exposure and then turn the highlights down. I think that'll work. No, that screws it over. Because if you do that, then it changes the entire... If I turn the contrast down and then the exposure up. Okay, so the difference is this to this. Yeah, I think that's better. It doesn't really change the wall color. I don't know why it shows up so yellow, but it changes our skin color to not be so jaundiced. And we could just apply the Lumetri to our red things as well. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so now all these clips should have the same thing. Good. Now we want to watch through the edit. We have the assembly put together. It's 8 minutes. We want this to end up being around 6 minutes. So let's see if there's any superfluous stuff. Points we're going to look for is around the second half. You can see here there's a lot of like uninterrupted clips. We're probably going to end up cutting those up. So let's just watch it through once and see what we got. Ladies and gents, we have finished Metal Gear 2 on stream, and this game is insanely good. We're bumping it up 3 years to 1990. Let's check out Metal Gear 2. The storyline in Metal Gear 2 is way more involved than it was in Metal Gear 1. The world is in a crisis. Oil is running out, and this one scientist created like a synthetic substitute for oil called Oilix. And as soon as he creates this thing, announces it to the world, he gets kidnapped. He's brought to this place called Zanzibar Land. And as it turns out, this is Big Boss, who somehow didn't die, brought him there and is in tandem creating another Metal Gear. So, of course, Snake definitely going to need to get in there and do something about that. This is where the series gets darker, it gets much more complex and meaty. The storyline really starts to matter. In Metal Gear 2, I feel like this is the moment when Kojima truly becomes interested in making his games cinematic. There's a lot of movie influences. There's a big Terminator influence in particular in the amazing opening title sequence. These red spots, for anyone who doesn't know, are where we're going to put B-roll clips. The big thing in Metal Gear 2 is that the stealth is way more involved this time. The first big change from Metal Gear 1 is that you can crouch, and that creates a whole new dynamic for this game. There are low walls you can go behind, there are things you can crawl inside of. In addition to that, guards can hear you. There are like different kinds of floors that will make noise. You can actually punch the walls and the guards will come running towards the area where the wall was punched. There's a lot more that you can do, not only that works against you, but you can also use this to your advantage. This whole complexity to the stealth, it just makes it a lot harder to sneak around. So, like, I was dying very often in this game at the beginning. Damn, that was a rough one. But now we know where to go. So we need to go to the right. Damn, when we finish this game and it tells us how many times we died, it's gonna be much higher than... So the question is, am I gonna die more times in this or Sekiro? Because honestly, I'm not sure at this point. I don't know. In a Souls game, we've averaged our death time to be once every 30 minutes. And in this game, it's about once every 30 seconds. So, I'm pretty sure Metal Gear 2 is more difficult than Souls. This time in Metal Gear 2, you have a way bigger support staff. What you can call people on the codec who have much more individualized personalities, they have specialties, and they have way more dialogue lines. So, you know, every time there's something new that happened in the game, we could call them up and see, oh, does this person have an insight about this gun I got, or does this person have an insight about this thing I'm doing? There's a lot of like fun little secret things they can say. It really makes it a lot more kind of like consequential to use your codec. We may not use that.
But as we keep going through the story, there are so many much more complicated storyline concepts going on. A lot of shades of gray going on with these characters. It's not really just like, get in there, save the people, get out, like it was in Metal Gear 1. One of the really interesting concepts that kind of exemplifies this most is early on in the game, you learn that the NATO bombing that took place at the end of Metal Gear 1, taking out the Outer Heaven complex, actually created a bunch of orphans, like a bunch of kids who lived in the area where Outer Heaven was, were now orphaned, and Big Boss took them in to, like, you know, his new Zanzibar Land facility just because they had nowhere to go. So it kind of creates this really interesting, like, picture of Big Boss as not necessarily a completely bad guy, and also the government as not necessarily being that great, because they did all this to these innocent people. So, you know, out of the gate, Kojima is really interested in tackling some much more complex subject matter. Another big change that influences the stealth in this game is that you have a radar that actually goes across multiple screens. It shows 9 different screens worth of things, and what that means is that the radar not only shows the locations of guards on all of these 9 screens surrounding you, but it also means that the guards can patrol across all of these screens. So there's a huge patrol area the guards will go on, and they're, the guards are actually persistently patrolling through these. So in Metal Gear 1, when you switched to another screen, it would essentially reset, and the guards would be patrolling from wherever they were when you last came on that screen. In this game, the guards will, they could be anywhere at any time, so you really have to keep an eye on where these guys are. There's a lot of moments where we would get tripped up by, guards coming in at the wrong time, or, this guy's patrol is coming around here. You really have to pay a lot more attention like an actual secret agent, because of course not everyone's going to be in the perfect place at the right time you want them to be. So this really made it feel like the world wasn't just catered to us, which I think is a big difference between Metal Gear 1 and Metal Gear 2. The other thing that I think is a huge triumph in Metal Gear 2 is that they really focused on the bosses this time. They have really interesting fights that not only are focused on the combat, but also turning it into more of like a puzzle. They utilize the multiple screens in the boss battles a lot to, try to force you to think outside the box. No pun intended, I guess. But they really want you to think in such a way that you're not just trying to shoot these guys, you're really trying to think about, like, how can I use multiple weapons? How can I utilize everything I have in order to take these guys down? What's really interesting is if you had a NES back in the day and you played a game called Metal Gear 2, it's actually a completely different game than the one that Kojima made. When Metal Gear 1 came out, it was a big success. Konami wanted to make a sequel, and Kojima did not want to do it. So Konami made their own video game called Metal Gear 2 Snake's Revenge. And Kojima had no idea that this was even being created. It was completely without his knowledge or consent. The story goes that he was on a train one day. He met one of his friends from Konami who was working on this secret Metal Gear 2 project. And then Kojima was like, what the hell? I want to make Metal Gear 2 if anyone's going to make it. And so he came up with his own idea for a Metal Gear 2 that he then pitched to Konami, and they allowed him to make in tandem to the other game called Snake's Revenge. So the real Metal Gear 2 is called Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. That's the one we played on stream. That's the canon Metal Gear 2. There's also another entirely different video game for the NES called Metal Gear 2 Snake's Revenge. So if you want to play the actual Metal Gear 2 that has, consequence on the plot of any of the other franchise games, you want to look for Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. You can get this in the HD collection or the Legacy collection of Metal Gear Solid, which they put out on the PS3 and 360. They have remasters of these two versions of the game in there. And interesting about the remaster to Metal Gear 2 is that at this point, they actually redid some of the artwork in the remastered version to match more closely to what would come up in future franchise titles. Metal Gear 2, go check it out, guys. Highly recommended. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you for watching this classic game review of Metal Gear 2. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe on this YouTube channel. We have all sorts of classic game reviews as well as other behind the scenes of our channel. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.
All right, every green marker that you can see I placed as we were watching through, those are problems that I want to address going back. That's a really useful thing if you're editing, because you don't want to keep pausing it. Like, it's really important to be able to watch the cut without interruption and understand the pacing and flow, but you do want to be able to mark where there were problems. So instead of just pausing it every time and fixing those, you watch it and you put markers when you see something wrong and you come back to fix them. Hey, Decaf coming in with the sub. The resub, 24 months, wow. An exclamation mark hype on that channel. Decaf Bossman, welcome into the show. Of course, as a member of the Coffee Posse, you get many things on here, including the Voice of Nick emote, legendary status in the chat and Discord, 200 meatballs, higher chance to win in the heist minigames, and ad-free streams. And because you're a member of that Latte Club, the Tier 2 subscription, you also have that handsome Voice of Nick cringe emote in there as well. We were doing some Voice of Nick cringes earlier when we were playing Metal Gear Solid 3. There's a lot of cringe bones being broken and stuff in that game. Thank you so much to Decaf for the continued support. I hope you've been well. What have you been up to? We're doing some video editing right now. We're working on our Metal Gear 2 classic game review. Oh, let's take out this bookmark too. So we're going to go back through our notes and we're going to see if we can solve some of these problems. Some of them are large scale things, some of them are small. So we'll just watch, because what I would have put the marker down after the problem, so we'll watch up until the marker.
Storyline in Metal Gear 2 is way more.
Also, I kind of want to change the lumetri a tiny bit. It's a little too... oh, look, input LUT. Do they have an iPhone LUT? No. Wishful thinking. Can I change the... sometimes you can change the wetness. No, you can't do it. Can't do it, yeah. Oh, what if I put a vignette on this, though? Does that look any better? It just kind of looks weird. It's kind of cool. Yeah, it's good. Face detection, look at that. Doesn't seem to really do anything, though. Okay, so what I want to do is, I guess we just want to remove some of the exposure. Oh, you know what we want to do? It's not the exposure, it's the saturation. No, not negative numbers. 80? I'm actually looking at my other, I'm looking at the stream feed because it's really hard to tell if you're going overboard when you're right in front of the thing. It's actually important to be able to see your thing really small. So I look at the other monitor so I can tell more objectively like what, you know, what I'm doing. All right, so we're going to remove the lumetri on this. We're going to put it back in with the fix. So that's what it originally looked like. Very yellow, I look jaundiced, basically, because that's the way the iPhone shoots it. It seems to favor yellow when I'm in this room because there's a lot of yellow walls. Decaf, I hope you've been well, though. And thank you once again for the continued support on the stream.
The storyline in Metal Gear 2 is way more involved than it was in Metal Gear 1. The world is in a crisis. Oil is running out, and this one scientist created like a synthetic substitute for oil called Oilix. And as soon as he creates this thing, announces it to the world, he gets kidnapped. He's brought to this place called Zanzibar Land.
This part, for anybody who didn't recognize while we were watching our cut, you know, there's all these cuts where you can see like it jumps like that, but basically my face is never really going to show up throughout the edit. So all these jumps that you see in my face are not really going to be, obviously it's all going to be footage of the game. So we don't worry about the video right now, we're worrying about the audio.
Scientist created like a synthetic substitute for oil called Oilix. As soon as he creates this thing, announces it. As soon as he Oilix. As soon as he creates this thing, announces it to the world, he gets kidnapped. He's brought to this place called Zanzibar Land. And as it turns out, this is Big Boss, who somehow didn't die, brought him there and is in tandem creating another Metal Gear. So, of course, Snake definitely going to need to get in there and do something about that. This is where the series gets darker, it gets much more complex. Is in tandem creating another Metal Gear. So he's brought to this place called Zanzibar Land. And as it turns out, this is Big Boss, who somehow didn't die, brought him there and is in tandem creating another Metal Gear. So, of course, Snake definitely going to need to get in there and do something about that. To the world, he gets kidnapped.
I think I'm going to keep that in for now. That'll be a second round of changes if we make it. I wanted to take out the part about Big Boss, but I don't think we need to. I think there's bigger fish we could fry.
Much higher than... So the question is, am I going to die more times in this or Sekiro? Because honestly, I'm not sure at this point. So the question...
This change was that I think we can remove this entire big chunk. And instead... let's do something like this, and then this, so that'll move our markers rather than just moving. If we move this back, the markers stay, and then it puts everything out of sync. So it's a nice little trick.
At the beginning. Higher than...
It doesn't matter if we do like small scale like that.
In this this game at the beginning. So the question is, I was dying very often in this game at the beginning. So the question is, am I going to die more times in this or Sekiro?
Yeah, this works perfectly now, because we didn't need that first part. Okay, this one is addressed.
Because honestly, I'm not sure.
And so now we're under 8 minutes, so we're really getting closer towards what we're looking for.
Going through this
I mean, it doesn't have to be 6 minutes long, but I'm just shooting for... I know it's going to be longer than the Metal Gear 1 review, because there's just more meat in this game than Metal Gear 1, but I'm just assuming 6 minutes is roughly what we want to go for.
The story, there are so many much more complicated storyline concepts going on. But as we keep going through the story, there are...
Okay, this... I don't need to say as we keep going through the story.
There are so many much more complicated storyline concepts going on. Like consequential to use your codec.
Oh, right. This part we might want to remove as well.
Way bigger support staff. What you can call people on the codec who have much more individualized personalities, they have specialties, and they have way more dialogue lines. So, you know, every time there's something new that happened in the game, we could call them up and see, oh, does this person have an insight about this gun I got, or does this person have it?
In the interest of being judicious, we're taking out this whole thing. Sorry, codec thing. It's a cool tidbit, but it's... We already have some good, like, little deep dives. It's too much of a tangent.
Number 2 is more difficult than Souls. There are so many much more complicated storyline concepts going on. A lot of shades of gray going on with these characters.
Okay, yes to the thing we just did, but another thing we can do.
So, of course, Snake plan to try and deal with matters. But as we keep going through the story,
Take that, put it back in. I'm gonna put all the effects back on it. What's the gain? I think it's +6, +4. Gonna put our effects back on Premiere. Help, stop it. Good. When your clip is too small, Premiere doesn't want to do the stuff you want to do. It like doesn't grab it properly. It's weird. Okay, so let's put this here, and then we know exactly where this needs to come in, like that.
Story, a lot of shit.
Good, better, way better.
Metal Gear 2 is more difficult than Souls. But as we keep going through the story, a lot of shades of gray going on with these characters. It's not really just like, get in there, save the people, get out, like it was in Metal Gear 1. One of the really interesting concepts that kind of exemplifies this most is, early on in the game, you learn that the NATO bombing that took place at the end of Metal Gear 1, taking out the Outer Heaven complex, actually created a bunch of orphans, like a bunch of kids who lived in the area where Outer Heaven was, were now orphaned, and Big Boss took them in to like...
Okay, this is one thing I wanted to do.
We're now orphaned. And Big Boss took them in.
Got it. Oh, that's perfect.
This most is, early on in the game, you learn that the NATO bombing that took place at the end of Metal Gear 1, taking out the Outer Heaven complex, actually created a bunch of orphans, like a bunch of kids who lived in the area where Outer Heaven was, were now orphaned, and created a bunch of orphans. Orphans.
So let's just do this to keep our markers.
Orphans and Big Boss. Orphans and Big Boss took them in.
Good.
Actually created a bunch of orphans, and Big Boss took them in to, like, you know, his new Zanzibar Land facility just because they had nowhere to go. Facility. Just because they
Perfect.
took them in.
Oops.
Them in just because they had. Boss took them in just because they had nowhere to go. So it kind of took them in just because they had nowhere to go. So it kind of creates this really interesting like picture of Big Boss as not necessarily a completely bad guy, and also the government as not necessarily being that great, because they did all this to these innocent people. So, you know, out of the gate, Kojima is really interested in tackling some much more complex subject matter.
Great. Ladies and gents, today we've made insane progress. We went through our entire first, assembly edit. We identified problems. We went through half of the problems already. We already removed an entire minute of superfluous content, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. So we went down from like 8, I think it was somewhere around like 8 minutes and 20 seconds. Now we're at 7 minutes and 6 seconds. So we're really cutting this thing down, but still keeping the flow and the content, probably improving it, to be honest, the flow. So guys, if you want to see where this video ends up once it's finished, you can go to our YouTube channel. You can go on YouTube and search for Voice of Nick Vlogs, or you can just click the link in the chat that I'm going to post right here. This will bring you to our newest video that we posted on the channel for Metal Gear 1. That's a Metal Gear 1 classic game review, which precedes this one, of course. This one will be Metal Gear 2, coming soon. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to that channel so you can see these when they get posted, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.